joined the Corps, we didn't have any fancy schmancy tanks. We had sticks. 2 sticks and a rock for a whole platoon. And we had to share the rock.
Spartans, welcome back to Doc's Download. I am Doc. Thank you for joining us today. Thank you for all the love and support. I really do appreciate it. Again, I love this shit. For the love of the game. So today, it's a fun video. We're kind of going with these, what is videos that have been kind of fun because, again, I'm trying to bring this to whether you're a fresh new face to the Halo franchise or you are a seasoned Spartan yourself. I kind of want to just set the stage of what Halo is and the universe that surrounds it. So we've talked about the Covenant. We've talked about a few of these other groups and specific characters, but now obviously we need to jump into the human realm of things. And so let's dive in, Spartans. Today here on Doc's Download, we are going to be talking about humanity, specifically their military arm of the UEG, the Unified Earth Government. We are going to be talking about the United Nations Space Command. This is their, again, massive military arm of the human species. Not only is it the military side of things, but it also covers exploration of the galaxy as well as scientific endeavors in the galaxy as well. The UNSC umbrella consists of 6 different groups. There is the UNSC Naval Command, which has the Navy and the shadowy Office of Naval Intelligence. There is the Unified Ground Command, which houses the Army, the Air Force, and the Marine Corps. And then last but certainly not least, Spartan Operations, which was added more recently as of 2553. But these 6 groups comprise the entirety of the United Nations Space Command. Let's go ahead and talk about when the UNSC was created and why. They were not created, the UNSC, until the later 22nd century, specifically for 2 groups that were in opposition of the United Nations, who was kind of the government at the time, like we have now, although they aren't the ruling government of the world. There were 2 groups, the Freedens, who were fascists, and the Kozloviks, who were communists. The Freedens specifically were formed in direct opposition to the Kozloviks because they did not want communism to win, so they wanted to take a fascist side. The UN actually designated them as terrorists, the Freedens specifically, after the attacks on the Kozloviks, destroying an embassy, killing mass amounts of civilians. And this specific attack started something called the Rainforest Wars that lasted almost 2 full years. They were primarily fought across South America on Earth, and the Kozloviks were also deemed terrorists by the UN as well at this time, taking place in these Rainforest Wars, totaling many civilian casualties, that it was getting out of hand and people were starting to be afraid and scared for what was going on around Earth and her colonies. This war took place in 2162. In response to the attacks on the Jovian moons, the Rainforest Wars, and the Mars campaign, the United Nations knew they needed to do something to stop these 2 groups from killing each other and killing civilians in the firefights, in the explosions, in the attacks. There was too much chaos and destruction going on. So the UN created a new military force comprising of naval and marine forces, hoping to prove itself to be a powerful force to defend Earth and her colonies at the time. And the United Nations Space Command was born. As they were used, they were very instrumental in the success of defeating these 2 groups. And the UN took this massive success and this total victory as a way to unify Earth and take control of all the national governments as well as assimilate Earth's national military force into a single fighting force. So instead of now having, 70 countries and their governments, there's now one government and one massive military fighting force. For the next several years, they ended up cracking down on the rest of the remaining freedom Kosovo extremists. And this early in humanity's existence, there were only a number of planets that had been occupied inside the solar system. So there was no faster than light travel. There was no slip space travel, nothing like that. We could just get to some moons, get to some other planets, but nothing. We're not jumping outside of our solar system. Obviously, that's still a great distance to travel to places like Mars and different moons like that, but we weren't outside of our solar system yet. In 2170, there was finally a treaty between the Freedens and the Kosloviks with the United Nations, ending this almost 10-year war in 2170. And subsequently after that, the United Earth government was created as a showing of democracy for outer space and having a true control over humanity as a whole. No longer are there individual nations. Everything's all in one now. Now that we have a little bit of history on the UNSC, when they were created and why, let's jump to another major milestone within humanity itself. We know that they could travel between planets within the Sol system, Earth's home system, right? With able to go to the moons, Mars, things like that. But when were they able to become spacefaring and truly travel interstellar? After that war had ended in 2170, the UEG saw some glaring problems within their own infrastructure. Massive overpopulation issues, especially on Earth, distributing food, producing food, and just the overall militarization that was done during that really caused a panic in a lot of the citizens of Earth and its colonies. This caused a complete reform, as we saw, where the United Earth government was created. They knew that they needed to do something. They could no longer just sit back and stay within the system. They needed to figure out how to get to other planets, other systems. It did take over 100 years to get this figured out, but there was a gentleman, Mr. Shaw and Mr. Fujikawa, who created the Shaw-Fujikawa Translight Engine, which allowed for slip space travel, faster than light travel. This allowed them to transition between normal and slipstream space, allowing interstellar travel. And finally, in 2362, the ship, the Odyssey, was launched as the first colony ship able to travel into another system, which is massive and monumental. But where would they go? How would they figure out what was sustainable and what wasn't? With this creation of a slip space capable ship, humanity was finally able to go about the galaxy and truly figure out where they were able to go. And they conducted their first expedition to the Epsilon Eridani system, which is about 10 light years away. So it does still take some time, but it is not instant. Slipstream space still does take some time. It is unfortunately not just like a instantaneous portal from one side of the galaxy to another. And we do know within the Epsilon Eridani system, there is one of humanity's greatest military strongholds that will be built in due time, and that planet is Reach. And we do know what happens to Reach. At this time, knowing that they are going to be an interstellar faring species now, they do create a couple new authorities. One of them is the Colonial Administration Authority, along with the Colonial Military Authority, What these were made for, what they were purposed for was to police the inner and soon to be outer colonies. What are those, you ask? The inner colonies were more of the elite and higher class citizens of the United Earth government. Rich aristocrats, extremely smart scientists, people like that, the best and brightest. The inner colonies ended up having about 200 or so planets, give or take some more, while the outer colonies were more of the blue collar. They were more of your farming, mining, material gathering world within the UEG's reach. So you can kind of see where there already might be a little bit of a problem. The UEG heavily relied on the outer colonies in their gathering of materials for the UNSC's exploration, scientific endeavors, and etc. But there would need to be some sort of fix for such a despairing class problem. With the inner colonies relying so heavily on the resources produced by the outer colonies, the UEG knew that they at all costs needed to keep their control, their grasp on these outer colonies to feed the need of the inner colonies. There became a point where the outer colonies began to quite literally outnumber the inner colonies 4-1. The outer colonies started to realize that, and so did the inner colonies, and it started creating a lot of fear within the inner colonies that the outer colonies could rebel and that the inner colonies would be completely outnumbered, because they absolutely would be. With the colonial authorities in the military, there was a lot of fighting between the military and the peoples of the outer colonies, because the UEG wanted to keep their grasp so tight. So the outer colonies just became more and more hostile towards inner colonies and the people from there, and especially Earth itself. People in the outer colonies started to despise the control so much that civil disobedience began to rise. Things like refusing to pay taxes, illegal trade and tender, off-grid manufacturing, things like that. And so in response, the UNSC upped its presence and really tried to gain even more control of a situation that was starting to spiral quite out of their control. It began fighting, it began small brush wars, and the outer colonies started to rebel. They started to create an insurrection that began, and it even spread into the inner colonies. Moles, rats, plants everywhere. Nowhere was safe from outer colony insurrectionists. Even the stronghold of Reach. What turned from legitimately peaceful protests by the outer colonies to full-blown terrorist attacks, the UEG's control began to just dwindle, and the inner colonies were at risk. The outer colonies stopped producing materials, goods, food. I mean, there's planets like Harvest, literally its name, Harvest. It produced massive amounts of food for the inner colonies. The UNSC tried several different approaches to combat this, but in so many of their different operations, there ended up being millions of civilians that ended up dying, stoking the fire even further for the insurrectionists. With the UNSC and the UEG truly panicking, not knowing what to do, they began to devise plans. They had different algorithms that were calculating that the outer colonies would truly rebel, and the empire of humanity would start to crumble if they did not figure out how to quell the unrest, quell the insurrection. So the UNSC, along with the Office of Naval Intelligence, stuck their brains together and tried to figure out what they could do. And this is where we got our first super soldier, the Orion Project. They were going to use these biochemically augmented soldiers to combat the rebellion, quell the insurrection. They were sent into several different operations to try and help, and they did well. They were great. At the height of this program, there was about 300 active Orion super soldiers. Obviously, some not making it through augmentation, things like that. But they were there to help stabilize and help keep control of the outer colonies, and they did okay. They didn't do bad. They did help quite a bit. But even then, there was still insurrection everywhere. There was moles everywhere, plants everywhere with the insurrection, feeding information about these super soldiers, about these programs. So it really just stoked the fire even worse. It became more and more out of hand. Every operation they would hope would fix this problem caused another domino effect problem. They discontinued the Orion project in 2506, thinking that it was no longer going to be worth the cost and the risk with all these operations causing so many civilian deaths. But in 2511, what I might say is the greatest human mind in Halo's franchise noticed something, that in the next 15 to 20 plus years that the outer colonies would fall into full rebellion, pushing themselves into the inner colonies. And that absolute genius of a woman is Dr. Catherine Elizabeth Halsey. She had read the Orion Project and knew that she could make it better. And by 2511, the Spartan 2 project was initiated. Spartan 2s were initially created for the purpose of combating insurrectionists. We're not going to go too into detail about it. I'm freaking giddy just thinking about it, because Spartan 2s are the best by and far. But that was their true purpose, was to be created for these insurrectionists, to combat them, to find the moles, the plants, and creating a force to shut down the insurrection for good. Hoping that the UEG and UNSC could hold their empire for that much longer. But a massive, massive change came. A extremely unexpected first contact happened on the year 2525. Harvest was visited by an unknown intelligent alien species and subsequently glassed, and that started the incredibly devastating war of the Human Covenant War. And we weren't sure if we were going to make it, but the Spartan 2 program changed everything. And although they were created for insurrectionists, if they would not have been created in the first place, then I'm certain humanity would not exist anymore. Spartans, we did it. I just wanted to take the time to talk about the UNSC, who they were, what they were about. Obviously, I did not go into extreme detail on some things, specifically some of the groups operating under the UNSC, is specifically ONI, because they've got a few sections within ONI themselves that are going to be whole videos themselves. And I just wanted to, obviously just touch on the Spartan 2 program, touch on Orion, touch on a few of these things that are monumental timeline stamps for humanity themselves. I hope you enjoyed the video. Let me know your favorite UNSC inspired ship, warrior, weapon. There's so many cool things. I didn't jump into anything like that. Those are all different type of videos for me. But I just kind of, I wanted to go through what the UNSC was, what they were about, what was happening, and the problems that still persist to this day, even in current lore with insurrection and rebellion and things like that. So again, thank you so much for all the love and support. I really do appreciate it. It means the world. For the love of the game, baby. That's all this is. So, again, thank you so much. I hope to see you guys very soon. And see you later, Spartans.